Hello and welcome back to Escaping Kerbin, where we aim to place a Kerbal on the surface of another planet. And today, everybody, I am pleased to announce that is going to be our goal. In the last episode, we sent 5 crafts to Duna, and we circled most of them around the planet by now, but some of them still have a little ways to go, and one of them got lost to space entirely. But we have a probe to set down first. We're going to touch down with a probe before we put any Kerbal boots on the surface, and then once we can safely decide that we can do it, that's when we're going to take our intrepid explorers out. So here we are, first starting with the probe, the combination of 3 different probes. And the goal initially was to land one probe on a pole, one probe next to the science center, and then the last probe was just going to go to some other random spot on Duna. But we picked up a contract in the last episode to transmit some data around the surface of Ike as well as to orbit Ike, so one of these is actually going to go on that trip instead. So we're just separating ever so gracefully away from the mothership, and we're going to take this little probe down to the surface. We don't have the best orbit, and it's very eccentric here, and it's in a polar orbit because this was when I thought all 3 were going to go down to the planet. I also have been dealing with some graphical glitches with my my maneuver nodes. As you see, if I zoom in close enough, the lines disappear. And when I have trajectories on, it gives me this real weird and wacky kind of path. So I have to kind of do a lot of this stuff by eyeball and hope that I'm pulling the right way. And initially I was going to land this one at the pole, since that would be the easiest landing from this orbit, but I figured we should probably go equatorial for our first one, just land somewhere in the middle, somewhere where we can see the real surface of Duna. And so sadly I'm coming around in such a way that I am hugging the sunset zone of the planet. So once I get my maneuver plotted in, it's time to adjust my thruster so that way I take a small burn, something that's only several seconds long, and extend it so that way we have the accuracy of a long burn. And we're just going to go ahead and time warp our way out to the maneuver. Now, just a quick recap in case you might have forgotten or didn't watch the build episode. This is a tiny little lander probe that has all the repeatable experiments on it, so it doesn't have mystery goo or material science, but it does have a thermometer, a barometer, sizing scan, that sort of thing. And the goal is to land this and hopefully take it to several different biomes. This isn't going to be the one, but we're also going to hopefully land one next to our crude lander whenever we get that down on the surface, because our crude lander doesn't have any science experiments of its own, so it's going to borrow the experiments from these probes. But this one we're just going to land wherever we can. And once again, I time warped past the surface of Duna. I could have gotten some cool shots as I got closer, but because I used the automatic time warp, it just did it very quickly. So we're pointing retrograde, and we're coming in. We don't have any kind of heat shield on this thing, just an engine. But since the atmosphere is so low on Duna, I feel a little bit safer coming in with no engine. And with this with this fairing on there, it kind of acts as a heat shield for our precious cargo, which would definitely probably most likely burn up in this situation if it wasn't protected. Go ahead and bring up my mech jib window for landing. And I'm really fighting this. I don't want it to start pointing prograde because that pointed fairing will turn it into a missile. And it will only pick up speed from there. Also, when we do eventually want to brake, it might be very difficult to flip this craft around if it's picked up so much speed going that way. And sadly, we're coming in on the dark side. I probably could have taken some more time, maybe done a few more orbits before deciding to descend. But I was impatient. I wanted to get down to Duna. And so here we are. We're going to land this in the dark side. And I'm including the whole journey down. I'm not time warping this. I'm not cutting past it because this is our very first descent into Duna's atmosphere. This is our very first of everything coming to Duna, and so a lot of the stuff you're going to see in this episode and the coming episodes is going to be unedited because I feel like nothing's routine right now. I only kind of like to edit things and push past things and time warp things when it's like, yeah, you know, you've seen this, countless times in this series, and if you watch any series, you've probably seen this even more times than that. But as far as it comes to landing on another planet, I feel that that's still fairly novel. And soon we're going to start breaking the sound barrier. As we get low enough into the atmosphere, the heating effects start to slowly dissipate. However, our parachutes are still in a danger zone that if we were to try to pop them now, they would most likely rip off or burn up. And one last time through the sound barrier. And of course, when I say one last time, I do mean 20. So I'm very surprised that our craft is held up together. I assumed that the engine would burn off at the very least. Maybe even the solar panel. Even though the solar panel we don't really need anymore. Technically, the engine we don't need either. We can slow ourselves down as long as the parachute can deploy. We can slow ourselves down enough with that. And on top of that, once we separate the probe from its delivery unit, the probe itself also has its own engine for a powered descent. And once again, I'm fighting this the whole way down. I don't want it pointing prograde, so I'm doing everything in my power to shove it away from that. As you saw there, I was distinctly and deliberately avoiding the prograde marker. But there's only so much I can do because it really wants to point that way. But coming in sideways is a good way of spreading out that heating effect. And over there we see Ike as we come down and as we adjust our engine to do full throttle instead of limited thrust, and we easily come back and line ourselves up with our retrograde marker and slow ourselves down. So my speed is dropping drastically. We are on a safe descent. We made it through the heat. All we have to do is land. And with that, we killed all of our horizontal velocity, so we are no longer going sideways, but now we are going straight up and down. So now our parachute tells us that it is safe enough to deploy, so we're going to go ahead and deploy that. But of course it is set to auto deploy, so it's going to be a little bit before it pops. And now for a little bit of the descent, I'm going to go ahead and turn the brightness up on this video. It was completely pitch black when I came down, so it was very hard to determine what was where. However, it was darker in the video than it was on my computer. So as much as you're seeing now is probably about as much as I was seeing, but without the adjustment in brightness, you wouldn't even be able to see this. So I apologize for it looking weird, but I wanted a little bit more context to the landing. But I will turn it off once we get close enough to the surface, because I want you to see what I saw when I came through. So our parachute has deployed. It's not fully opened yet. And there it goes, and we have plenty of time to slow down. I'm very happy that I rated the parachutes as I did, because this should give us a safe landing. Now, I went ahead and staged the fairing, and I did that a little too early because we still had so much speed that it actually broke my communitron on there. I don't know if that was because I was too high or if that was always going to happen, but... So now we are going slow enough, and we're only so far above the surface. I do have it set to sea level instead of actual, but so we're actually closer to the surface than that number reads. So I went ahead and separated the lander. We deployed our landing gears, and we are going to get ready to come down. There are no parachutes on this. It's just going to be a powered landing. And as we get closer, I'm going to go ahead and turn the brightness off, so you can see just how harrowing it was to suddenly see the ground come up below you. And you might be able to tell we're playing with Parallax 2, which gives a lot of ground scatter, and we're also playing with collisions turned on, so each one of those rocks has mass. So thankfully it didn't tip us over, but there's a very real chance for our probes to get tipped over due to the ground area that they choose to land on. And same with our crewed lander. We're going to have to pay attention to where we set ourselves down. So I'm going to go ahead and extend the solar panels and extend the big old communication dish. And so now we're just going to go ahead and time warp to daytime, and during this time our landing stage went ahead and landed a little more forcefully than it meant to be, and it exploded, which is good because it clears up some space trash for us. But soon enough, the sun rises on Duna over our craft, and we get to see around ourselves. We get to see our success. So that is landing 1 of 2. Now it's time for the crew. So here we are back at the Duna Research 1, piloted by Bilbrey Kerbin, engineered by Pat Fay Kerbin, and the Scientist Research Center is led by Ferdos Kerbin, all of whom are veterans of space travel. We do have an intern scientist on board, a 0-star, who has never even left Kerbin, so this is quite the first adventure for them. So now we're going to put this down equatorially. We want it to be kind of nice and center for the rest of our operations. So we press tab to focus on the maneuver instead of our craft. This helps us fine-tune and zoom in correctly. And using the trajectories mod, we get an idea of where we're going to land once we come through the atmosphere. And I want to land somewhere near this little canyon right there. I don't want to land in the canyon, but I do want to be close enough that we can make several different biome hops and get all the science in a relatively close and nearby positioning. So now I'm reorienting myself towards the maneuver node. And we are going to get ready to come on down. And we did use up quite a bit of our life support. We're only going to have a little under a year to spend on Duna. And hopefully by that time we'll be able to get a rescue mission organized, set up, and sent out here. So that way they can stay as long as they need to, do all the research they need to, and live long enough to make it back home. Because we're playing with TAC life support. There is no congratulations on your new colony. That is not in our cards. Let's go ahead and fire. And we only have half of our fuel left. It's not very encouraging. We want to make sure that we have enough to complete our powered landing. This does have parachutes, but I don't want to rely on them because this is quite a heavy craft. And when I was rating my parachutes back in the VAB, none of them they all gave me the warning that the craft was too heavy for them. So I don't know how it was calculating that. Maybe it was calculating just if it were to only work with parachutes instead of a combination of both. But so I'm not trusting these parachutes very well. So now that we've got our solar panels stowed and we have our communication dish stowed, we're ready to go ahead and time warp our way to the atmosphere and start breaking through. We do get our first views of the Duna equator, because we came in at night, and the last time we weren't able to really see what it was that we were looking at. And we also didn't come in from the equator, we came in from the pole. So this is nice and new, and really enjoying it. It's interesting what a color change can do, what a palette change. That so far in our programs we've dealt with blues, we've dealt with pale greens, and we've dealt with grays of the Mun, Minmus, and Kerbin. This is the first time we've had an orange palette, and it's just so bright and positive and hopeful. And the fact that we're finally completing the goal of this program is just wonderful. So thankfully it's staying relatively straight. However, the time warping will cause it to stray slightly once we start coming in through the atmosphere, getting our heating effects. So we're going to have to keep an eye on our craft. I go and roll just to kind of dissipate the heat, even though I didn't get any gauges telling me that I had to. But I started to roll until I realized that it was taking me off my retrograde marker. And so I then come back, kill my time warp, and just hold as steady as I can. So now it's just a matter of holding, firing our engines to keep ourselves going straight, and finding a nice place to land. Because we're going to be on the mountainous side and not down in that ravine, which is nice and flat, that would be an ideal place to land. But no, we're going to be up here on the highlands, or at least the midlands. And once again, we try to time warp our way to ease it down for ourselves, you know. I can always speed up the footage for y'all if I needed to, but for myself I wanted to go a little bit quicker, so I decided to time warp. But again, not great, makes us stray. I do a crew report in the atmosphere. We're gonna have to wait on an EVA report because we're still going way too fast. And if a Kerbal were to fall off the ladder over here, they would have quite the journey to make it back to our ship. And we're just going to repeat this cycle until we make it down. And we've got a nice little flat-ish looking landing spot, so we don't want to keep burning too much. So as you can see, we're approaching where the slope is in that area. We don't want to land on the slope. But thankfully, we do have quite a bit of fuel remaining, so if we need to readjust, there's a possibility that we can. There's also the possibility that we end up readjusting so much that we run out of fuel before we can safely touch down, and if that is the case, there's a very real chance that we'll blow up the bottom of our craft, including all of our life support. So I'm keeping an eye on the mech jib burn indicator to let me know when to start firing, but I also want my parachutes to deploy, and I'm not exactly sure why they're not. And we're getting close to the countdown. Still no action from the parachutes. And then I see that I'm actually going to go over the slope. I'm going to go a little bit too far than what I was hoping for, so I went ahead and just started the engines now to hopefully bring that trajectory a little bit closer. And we're reaching the 2,000 mark, which is when the drogue chutes should have deployed. Still hasn't. And we're getting close to the 1,500 mark, which is when the rest of the parachutes should have deployed, and they didn't. So I'm starting to get very nervous, and I'm starting to realize that the parachutes aren't going to go at all. So I come in here and I start clicking to manually deploy them, and thankfully they actually deploy. So I'm just going to run through and try to click as many of these as I can. Since they're not armed, and since they're not deploying on symmetrically, all I can do is hope that I get enough of them to slow myself down. And as you see, we made it onto the upper ledge of that, and using the parachutes to slow me down, I quickly kill off all of my horizontal velocity, and we're coming straight down. So now, as long as we don't miss our suicide burn and come down with too much force, it's looking good. It's looking like this is going to be a successful landing. A successful crewed landing interplanetarily. So now that we're going slow enough, I go ahead and get our scientists out on EVA. Ferdas Kerbin, braving the hazards of the environment, being the first Kerbal outside the craft. So we went ahead and transmitted that crew report, that EVA report, because that's going to be quite a bit of science for us. And then we're going to go ahead and get him out one more time, and we're going to do another EVA report, but this one we are going to study in the research lab. And I get Bilberry out because I thought that I needed to take the crew report out of the crew capsule, but then I remembered that I set it to be researched, so there was no need. "42 meters above the surface and descending. "20 meters. I start slowing down, but I do go a little fast, and I start coming back up again. "10 meters. And touchdown. Apparently our capsule is only 9 meters above the ground, so we landed a little bit sooner than I had expected. I was watching that, but we have made it. We have made it safely to the surface of Duna, everybody. We have escaped Kerbin. Now, that's not going to be the end of the series. There's still more to do. I still want to be able to rescue these Kerbals and bring them home. I want them to do all the science. I want to unlock new parts. I want to go to other planets and other moons. So we have successfully completed the goal of this series, but that's not to say that we're done with it. So let's go ahead and transmit our crew report. Let the Kerbals tell everyone back at Mission Control what it is that they experience here on another planet. And we're going to shut down all of our engines so we don't accidentally turn them on and relocate. Because, once again, we have next to no fuel. So now, before I get our intrepid explorers out, I'm going to come back here to the Mission Control and see if there is a contract. And planting a flag on Duna, especially for this much money, I mean, how can we say no? Let's go ahead and accept that contract, and then we'll hop on back to Bilby Kerman, climbing down the ladder, repeating over and over again the words that he is going to say once he puts his foot down on Duna. Being the historical Kerman to ever set foot on another planet. The first of many. And after a long journey down that ladder, turns around and runs. He is so excited. He is just so ready to place his flag and place himself in the history books of Kerbin. And there we have it, everybody. Mission accomplished. But anyways, that is where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you've been enjoying this whole journey that we've been on. If you did, please consider giving me a like, drop me a comment, let me know your thoughts, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.